Well, thousands of dock workers at ports are now on strike, including New Orleans. Devontae Martin joins us now with more on how that could impact Northeast Louisiana. Devontae?
Jennifer, the strike is the first in almost 50 years. For Northeast Louisiana, the ripple effects could be felt soon.
And if they don't resolve it soon, it's going to affect everybody.
Members of the International Longshoremen Association walked off the job 1 minute after midnight Tuesday after stalled negotiations with the U.S. Maritime Alliance. Among their ultimatums, higher pay and the continuation of its current ban on fully automated equipment. Eric Mansell, owner of B&E Wholesale in West Monroe, says almost half of his stock will be affected by the strike.
It's going to affect us probably in a couple weeks. I got a load in today. 80% of those pallets are from overseas.
The strike could increase the cost of consumer goods. ULM economics professor Dr. Tammy Johnston detailed the impact it could have in the region.
One of the things that was mentioned was fresh fruit will be one of the things that is affected soon. Pharmaceuticals, that's also a very important aspect. It's very fragile, and so anything could increase inflation again if this was to continue.
The strike could also cost the U.S. economy nearly $4 billion in the first week. With the holidays right around the corner, a long strike will create massive shortages.
Just general merchandise, especially if this lasts for weeks going into Christmas, some of the things that we would normally want to be able to buy for Christmas, there may be shortages.
Port authorities say the union is not negotiating in good faith, despite offering wage hikes. Jennifer?